Hello students, this is Hardik sir. Today we will be starting our part 2 of history lesson number 4, the Mughal Empire from standard 7. So with the previous video we have completed up to the part Mughal traditions of succession. We are going to start from this video particularly, and with the end of that video you would have seen that I had given you two words, that is primogeniture and copercenary. So you have to first identify or understand the meaning of these two words, primogeniture. So primogeniture means the eldest son inherits his father's estate, means the entire property of a father would be inherited to the eldest son of the family. And copercenary inheritance, so that is the division of the inheritance, means the division of the father's estate or the property among the all sons. So what we are going to see with this part, so Mughal traditions of succession. So as from the title we are going to understand that what was the tradition of succession during the period of Mughal. So how did they follow the succession, means who would be receiving the inheritance, means the entire property or the estate would be received by whom. So the Mughals did not believe in the rule of primogeniture. They did not believe in this primogeniture, means where the eldest son inherited the entire estate. Instead they followed the Mughal and Timurid custom of copercenary inheritance. So they followed the another custom, that was the copercenary or a division of the inheritance among all the sons. So as we have already seen with the previous video also, and you would have read the entire lesson most probably well in advance, and if you have not gone through this, I request you to read the textbook very carefully. If possible, read entire lesson or each and every lesson of your textbook twice. So as it is given, follow the highlighted passage in table 1 as we have seen with the previous video, and note the evidence for rebellions by Mughal princes. We have seen some rebellions wherein the son of the family, means the ruler's son, rebels for the inheritance. So we have seen already those things. And according to you, which is the fairer division, primogeniture or the copercenary? So whatever your answer may be, so please write in comment if possible for you to write. Here we are helped with the next title, that is Mughal relations with other rulers. Other rulers wants to say the rulers of other region, and how were the relations of Mughals with those people. So for that also we are helped Mughal marriages with Rajputs, as you can see here. So before we jump over there, we will have an introductory paragraph. So again you are requested to take a look at table 1 once again. You would have already seen. If you have not, then I request you to open your textbook page number 48 and 49. So on those page you will find the table 1. So you will notice that the Mughal rulers campaigned constantly against the rulers who refused to accept their authority. Mughal rulers had a continuous campaign, we have seen, for the expansion. So who were not ready, the other rulers, if they were not ready to accept their authority, they kept on campaigning continuously. But as the Mughals became powerful, because of their continuous campaigns, we can say, as the power increased, there were many rulers who joined them voluntarily, means without any campaign they accepted the authority of Mughals. The Rajputs are a very good example of this. Many of them married their daughters into Mughal families and received high positions, but many resisted as well. So many Rajput rulers married their daughters into Mughal families, means to maintain very good relations with Mughals. We have this example given in the book itself. So many of them also resisted, as we know. Here we have one example. So Mughal marriages with the Rajputs. You can find the mother of Jahangir was a Kachwaha princess. and she was a daughter of a Rajput ruler of Amber, which is presently known as Jaipur. So you can have an example. As we have seen, they married their daughters with the Mughal families. So here you can find the mother of Jahangir, who was a Kachwaha princess, and she was a daughter of Rajput ruler and the ruler of Amber. You can understand, she was a daughter of Rajput ruler of Amber, and that is presently known as Jaipur. The mother of Shah Jahan was a Rathod princess, and she was a daughter of Rajput ruler of Marwar, that which is known as Jodhpur. So you are very familiar with these names, and you can understand what I mean to say is that for maintaining good relations, we have such examples of the Mughal marriages with the Rajputs, and just you can come to know that Mughals also had tried to maintain a very good relationship as well as the Rajputs. We are also having some more information about Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar, who refused to accept Mughal authority. So for a long time this became that they refused to accept the Mughal authority, and they were Sisodia Rajputs. Once when they were defeated, however, they were honorably treated by Mughals. So even after the defeat, they were not given any ill treatment. They were treated with honor, and they were given their lands back, means their watan, as assignments. Assignments, they had the rights of revenue collection and all administration. So they were known as watan jagirs, as you can understand. So Sisodia Rajputs in the beginning, or we can say for a long time, they refused to accept authority of Mughals. But when once they were defeated, they were treated honorably, and that is why you can see that they were also treated honorably by the Mughals. They also gave them their lands back as assignments, and they came to be known as Watan Jagirs. The careful balance between defeating but not humiliating their opponents enabled Mughals to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. So the balance between defeating but not humiliating their opponents, they didn't insult anyone, and that is why we can say that they had their influence over many kings and chieftains. But it was difficult to keep balance all the time. Every time it was not possible कि हर बार यही चीज़ें हो, and that's why we are also given in table 1 about Aurangzeb, wherein you can find Shivaji. He insulted Shivaji. So this incident occurred. We have already seen in table 1. We have completed the part in the first video. So campaigns against Maratha chieftain Shivaji were initially successful, as you are given in your book, that they were successful. But Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji, who escaped from Agra and declared himself an independent king and resumed his campaigns against the Mughals. So you can understand. So as you are given with the question at last, what was the consequence of this insult? So as you can come to know, Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji when he came to accept Mughal authority. So he came to accept Mughal authority, but because of Aurangzeb's insult, what was the scenario? That Shivaji declared himself an independent king and resumed his campaigns against the Mughals. The next subtitle you can find about the Mansabdar and Jagirdars. So these two words are new for you. Before we enter with the meaning of Mansabdars and Jagirdars, we are given some introduction. So first we will complete with that, and you will come to know that who were enrolled as Mansabdars. As the empire expanded to encompass different regions, the Mughals recruited diverse bodies of people. So because of the expansion, समझ सकते हैं आप, so they had need ultimately to rule, to govern, to administer a team of persons. It means they needed members, and those bodies of people were recruited by the Mughals for better administration. For a small nucleus of Turkish nobles known as Turanis. So from a small you can understand, nucleus of Turkish nobles, they expanded to include Iranians, Indians, Muslim, Afghanistan, Rajputs, Marathas, and also other groups. So they, for expansion, ultimately you can understand, from a small Turanis, now they had a number of people. Those who joined Mughal service were enrolled as Mansabdars, and this system was introduced by Akbar. The term Mansabdar refers to an individual who holds a Mansab. So now what is a Mansab? So Mansab, that means a position or a rank. It was a grading system used by Mughals to fix rank, salary, and military responsibilities. So Mansabdar, you can understand, it was according to that grading system. The rank was also fixed, the salary was also fixed, and their military responsibilities were also fixed. Rank and salary were determined by a numerical value called Zat. So according to that numerical value Zat, you can understand, nobles with a Zat of 5,000 were ranked higher than those of 1,000. So who had a numerical value higher, means the Zat, the number of Zat increased, that means their salary also will be increased. So the higher the Zat, the more prestigious was the noble's position in the court and the larger his salary. So as the number increases of Zat, then definitely the position in the court and salary both will be increased. The Mansabdar's military responsibilities required him to maintain a specified number of Sawar. Sawar, that is Gode Sawar, you can come to know, that is cavalryman. So his responsibilities required him to maintain a specified number of Sawar or cavalrymen. So as it was a part of his job, you can understand, it was fixed, military responsibilities were fixed, and for that he had to maintain cavalrymen, he had to maintain Sawar. द मानसबदार ब्रॉट हिज कैवलरीमैन, वो वहाँ लेके आएंगे रिव्यू के लिए, रजिस्ट्रेशन के लिए, उनके घोड़ों की ब्रांडिंग के लिए, एंड देन दे विल रिसीव मनी टू पे देम एज सैलरी. So Mansabdar will receive money, you can understand here, and that money will be paid in the form of salary to this cavalryman by a Mansabdar, and Mansabdar will get money from Mughals. So Mansabdar received their salaries as revenue assignments. So they were not actually getting their direct salaries. They were given some revenue assignments wherein they had right to collect revenue, and they were known as Jagirs. So which were somewhat like Iktas. We have seen about Iktadars, but it was not at all like Muktes. That also we have already seen in the previous lessons. So most Mansabdars did not actually reside in or administer their Jagir. So ये मानसबदार जो वहीं रहते नहीं थे, ना ही उसे एडमिनिस्टर करते थे, सिर्फ रेवेन्यू कलेक्शन करवाते थे. दे ओनली हैड राइट्स टू द रेवेन्यू ऑफ देयर असाइनमेंट्स, और वो भी उनके सर्वेंट्स के द्वारा कलेक्ट हो जाता था. एंड दैट टैक्स वॉज ऑल्सो कलेक्टेड फॉर देम बाय देयर सर्वेंट्स, वाइल द मानसबदार्स themselves served in some other part of the country. In Akbar's reign, these Jagirs were carefully assessed. So this particular paragraph is very important for understanding, for administration also. If you also will be somewhere at the higher level in future with the administering part, so by that time you need to recall all this. So there are keys for the better administration in the history. So in Akbar's reign, these Jagirs ultimately, as you can see, were carefully assessed. So there was a proper assessment of these Jagirs, means the revenue assignments from where they had to collect the revenue. So they were carefully assessed so that the revenues were roughly equal to the salary of the Mansabdar. They were roughly equal. By Aurangzeb's reign, you can understand now, by the time of Aurangzeb, this was no longer the case, and the actual revenue collected was often less than the granted sum. So the revenue, whatever the amount was collected, was less than the granted sum, means the salary of the Mansabdar. So there was a huge increase in the number of Mansabdars, which meant a long wait before they received a Jagir. So huge increase. So now what was the increase? We will have some information about that also. You are also helped with this. So there were, in the beginning you can find, in Akbar's reign, during the rule of Akbar, 29 Mansabdars were with a rank of 5000 Zat. So there were 29 Mansabdars. Here you can find that number had increased up to 79 during Aurangzeb's reign. So you can understand the difference. So by Aurangzeb's reign, the number of Mansabdar had increased to 79. So what I mean to say is, during this particular period, you can see by Aurangzeb's reign there was no longer the case. So actual revenue, as you can understand, before there were only 29 and now there were 79 Mansabdars. So the increase is too much, you can understand very easily. So because of this situation, the huge increase in the number of Mansabdars, they had to wait long before they received a Jagir, means their revenue assignment. So for that revenue assignment they had to wait for a long time. These and other factors created a shortage in the number of Jagirs. As a result, many Jagirdar tried to extract as much as revenue possible. So as much revenue they could collect, they started collecting while they had a Jagir. Aurangzeb was unable to control these developments in the last years of his rule, and the peasantry therefore suffered tremendously. So to the point, you can understand in the easiest words that during Akbar's period there were only 29 Jagirdars or Mansabdars, we can say, and by the Aurangzeb's time there were 79. So you can understand the area would be divided much. The revenue collection amount with the sum with the total would be same, but now it had to be paid among 79 people, and that's why there was a long wait, and ultimately there was a shortage in Jagir, that means in the amount. So you can understand, so this system actually failed and Aurangzeb was unable to control this particular development. Here you can find a Mansabdar on march with his Sawars. So you can also see some Sawars, a cavalryman, which you can see in the picture with the figure 6. Below is the figure 6. So these two pictures, what do they suggest you? So we have an explanation, details from a miniature from Shah Jahan's reign depicting corruption in his father's administration. So first is a picture of a corrupt officer receiving bribe. So here you can find, so this is the first picture, receiving bribe. Second, you can find about a tax collector punishing poor peasants. So here you can find that particular scene also. So tax collector has now started punishing these poor farmers. Now we have the next subtitle, that is Zabt and Zamindar. So this would be the last subtitle, and after that we will be pausing this video and then we will be starting with the next part 3. So please don't get bored and continue watching. The main source of income available to Mughal rulers was tax on the produce of the peasantry. As we all know, being an agricultural country, obviously the agricultural produce or production yields the taxes for the country or for a kingdom. So the main source of income available to the Mughal rulers was tax on the produce of the peasantry. In most places, peasants paid taxes through the rural elites. Elites, what do you mean elites? So elites, that is the headman or the local chieftain. So these taxes were paid by these people, either by the headman or by a local chieftain. Means they would collect the entire revenue and then would convey the same to the higher authorities. The Mughals used one term, zamindars, to describe all intermediaries, whether they were local headmen or villages of powerful chieftain. So the Mughal used the one term that was common, zamindar. या वो लोकल हेडमैन हो, विलेज हेडमैन हो, या लोकल चीफ्टेन हो, दोनों के लिए कॉमन वर्ड था एंड दैट वाज ज़मींदार। सो द मेन सोर्स ऑफ इनकम जो मुग़ल के लिए था वो पेसेंट्री था, एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्शन से ही आता था और वो ये रूरल एलाइट्स के थ्रू होता था। अकबर्स रेवेन्यू मिनिस्टर, you have heard the name before, Todermal. So Todermal carried out a careful survey of crops. 10 साल का एक पीरियड, that is you can understand the crop prices, crop yields, prices and areas, जो 10 साल के लिए 1570 से 1580, 1570 से 1580 तक ये एक पूरा सर्वे किया गया एंड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दिस डाटा particularly tax was fixed on each crop in cash. हर एक क्रॉप के लिए कैश में एक टैक्स का पैटर्न, पूरा टेबल एक फिक्स कर दिया गया। ईच प्रोविंस वॉज डिवाइडेड इनटू रेवेन्यू सर्कल्स, हर एक हिस्से को एक एक रेवेन्यू सर्कल में बांटा गया विथ इट्स ओन स्केड्यूल of revenue rates for individual crops. So you can understand that because of this survey, now there was a proper system and the revenue system was known as Zabt. So this particular system, from the title you might not have understood anything, but now both the words are very pretty clear. Zabt and Zamindar. Zamindars, as you can come to know here, to describe all intermediaries, whether they were the local headmen or of villages or the powerful chieftain, and the system of the collection of revenue rates for individual crops, and that was known as Zabt. Even with the schedule you can understand the word. So it was prevalent in those areas where Mughal administrators could survey the land and keep very careful accounts. So ये उन्हीं इलाकों के लिए था जहाँ ये केयरफुल वे में बराबर सर्वे कर पा रहे थे, अकाउंट्स वगैरह मेंटेन हो पा रहा था। बट फॉर गुजरात एंड बंगाल इट वॉज नॉट पॉसिबल। इन सम एरियाज द ज़मींदार्स एक्सरसाइज्ड अ ग्रेट डील ऑफ पावर. सो ज़मींदार, एज दे हैड अ पावर, यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड, दे वर कलेक्टिंग द रेवेन्यूज. So the exploitation by Mughal administrators could drive them to rebellion. Sometimes zamindars and peasants of the same caste allied, they all came together and ultimately they rebelled against the Mughal authority. These peasants' revolts challenged the stability of the Mughal Empire from the end of the 17th century. So from the end of the 17th century. So you can understand from this particular paragraph, in some areas zamindars exercised a great deal of power. So because already they were powerful people and they were also given the rights, so now they became more powerful. And मुग़ल एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स जिस तरह से इन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव छोटे छोटे यूनिट्स को एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहे थे अल्टीमेटली बाय द मीन्स ऑफ रेवेन्यू, सो दैट ड्राइव देम टू दी रेबेलियन. और इसी वजह से शायद रेबेल शुरू हो गए. सो ज़मींदार और ये सेम कास्ट के पेसेंट मिलके कहीं ना कहीं रिबेल शुरू कर दिया, रिवॉल्ट शुरू कर दिया. एंड दीज पेसेंट रिवॉल्ट्स की वजह से ही शायद 17th सेंचुरी के अंत तक मुग़ल एम्पायर खतरे में आ गया. सो वी विल पॉज बाय दिस पर्टिकुलर पार्ट हियर ओनली. सो टिल देन कीप रीडिंग, कीप लर्निंग. थैंक यू.